Okay, so welcome back, everybody, and I hope, like me, you're finding the day's proceedings very interesting. I certainly am. Now, I'm really looking forward to the next panel because it's that little subject of collateral. Now, collateral clearly is a major issue in our business, always has been, always will, and I'm looking forward to hearing our panelists talk about what's currently going on in this world. What are the issues? They're challenged, I think, to get this done in 40 minutes. So I'm not going to say very much other than simply to introduce the moderator of the next session, Bill Foley. Bill is the Managing Director of Sector Hub, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. So over to you, Bill. Thank you, and I'll see you again in about 40 minutes.
Thanks, Kevin. We won't disappoint, and we'll cover off some of the, as you say, it's rather a large topic. Collateral management touches upon every aspect of securities finance, but the way that collateral is used and managed is constantly changing to meet evolving demands. What are those demands, and how has technology evolved to meet them? And what does the future look like? We'll be discussing that today, and joining me to share their thoughts, we have Ted Allen, Director of Business Development for Securities Finance and Collateral Management at FIS, Jerome Cardon from Securities Finance and Collateral Management at Broadridge Financial Solutions, Grant Davies, Head of Sales for EMEA at Equilend, and Neil Fowler from Securities Lending Product Management Team at Calypso. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
To set the scene slightly, collateral optimization, efficient collateral management, cost reduction, revenue generation, and of course, risk mitigation. We ask a lot of our collateral and our collateral programs. All those things are desirable and amazingly easy to talk about, but probably not always quite so easy to deliver. So looking at those factors and maybe sharing some others, what do market participants need to think about when striving for that optimal position? Neil, maybe you could give us some insight there.
Yeah, sure. So I think we need to ask what factors are at play that make us consider the need for efficient, effective collateral management. Now, post-crisis, the undoubted winner was financial regulation and oversight. New regulations such as BCBS, IOSCO, uncleared margin rules, and of course, our own SFTR and its collateral reporting requirements. More recently, COVID has caused increased volatility in the market, more trading opportunities, which as a result ends up in more hedges, more shorts being covered. And of course, finally, we have the need to finance Treasury. Now, these and other factors are bringing about a substantial increase in the value and the volume of margin calls our collateral teams are able to handle. The source of this collateral increasingly includes the usage of global bonds and equities where cash may once have been prevalent. So if we take some of these factors, the liquidity needs of an institution, the rise of value and volume of calls, the increased usage of non-cash collateral, all of this means that our assets and the management of these assets are now at centre stage. We may now have for the first time contention over who owns the inventory and where it's best used. We definitely have increased scrutiny on how it's being used. So therefore, using our inventory optimally has never been more important. So if we go back to the question, how do we position ourselves? Technology needs to provide us with a holistic view of our securities and cash inventory. But to be honest, it's just a start. It needs to facilitate the ability to tag or label the inventory with a combination of external data or internal attributes. Now, the external data attributes from Bloomberg and Reuters, they allow us to understand the asset and the quality of the asset. External data from Equilend and IHS Market help us to understand the price point, its fee, its rebate rates achievable or to be paid. They also help us to understand the abundance or the scarcity of an asset, which in turn facilitates our own internal labeling, such as specials for bonds or warm or hot for equities. Now, these factors begin to help us differentiate our assets' potential usage between trading and collateral management. Then we can begin to layer rules or guidelines and equally as important constraints over its usage. We're now in a better place to address the challenges we face, whether that be how to utilize inventory to receive the best return, how to meet the eligibility criteria of our counterparty exposures, or just to ensure that we're able to monetize or utilize idle assets. Now, of course, this is all good in theory. The main barrier I see to complete inventory optimization is the lack of a shared platform across the organizations. Now, we all know the reason for this. We've got historical purchasing of best of breed platforms for differing products or differing asset types, for front office and for back office. We've got internal builds thrown into the mix. This, for what many has shaped a suboptimal landscape. Now more than ever, it's time to address these issues to ensure that our institution is working on a solid foundation. So to be best positioned, I would say we need a holistic, real-time, single shared inventory view. It's got to be aware of our assets location and its settlement status. It has to have inventory that can be tagged, labeled and separated to its best usage. It has to have the ability to have rules that can define or guide us into its best usage. This is the position we want to be in to unleash the potential of all of our assets, either as a source of inventory, as a source of liquidity, or even in this case, as a base platform to meet our collateral needs.
Quite a lot there, and thanks for that. It's a very complete answer. And I guess the themes I pick up from that mostly are around, first of all, taking a holistic view of the assets available, and also the ability to look at the value or cost, opportunity or challenge, etc. Around those. That's particularly looking at securities finance, which is appropriate for where we are today and the topic in this particular event. But presumably that's only part of the picture when we think about collateral across a broader range of products as well. Ted, maybe your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think just to make all of those problems that Neil just talked about a little bit harder. You know, you got. I mean, if we're just considering within the securities finance space itself, it's hard enough when you've got your fixed income and your equity silos, and you might have your US and your rest of the world or your international silos as well. So you've always got a challenge of bringing, you know, just within the securities finance world, bringing that stuff all together into one place. Looking more broadly, as Neil alluded to, you've got UMR next wave coming in September of next year. So that's the extra initial margin requirements for the non-cleared OTC derivatives, the next wave of firms impacted by that. That's going to create an extra demand on assets within firms, and particularly, of course, high quality assets that are needed for initial margin. And of course, that's going to directly impact what's available for your liquidity requirements and what's available for your lending program. So, yeah, I mean, I would agree with Neil. We're talking the way forward is to talk more about inventory optimization rather than just collateral optimization, as we have done, I guess, in the past. And you know, to address those challenges of bringing the inventory together across securities finance and the other sources and uses of collateral, and then to work out how best to allocate that inventory across those different requirements, so that you are minimizing the cost, be it a funding cost or an opportunity cost of the collateral that you're using, maximizing the return from your lending program, and also taking into account things like about balance sheet costs and so forth as well. So yeah, you do need to. I think that extra demand that is coming from the next wave of UMR makes that problem ever more urgent, and you know, the extra incentive to really put in place platforms that can aid you in consolidating the inventory and then working out how to make best use of that inventory, considering all of those different requirements.
Thanks, Ted. So there's a huge amount for us to factor into that decision before we can think about how we optimize. And you made the point about inventory rather than collateral. All inventory is potentially collateral, and I guess potentially vice versa as well. And you also touched upon balance sheet there. So Jerome, turning to you, thinking about, we've done the analysis of all our assets across all the products. We know their value, we know what's coming in, we know what's going to go out. We've met our obligations, we've maxed out our opportunities, we've minimized all of our costs. Am I optimized now? Or is there anything else I need to be thinking about?
Yeah, well, actually, you know, this is the thing about optimization, is that it's not a Boolean. It's not true or false. You're not optimized or you're not optimized. It's a journey. You're learning, and you're learning a lot about the landscape of the assets that you have in your inventory, the condition in which you're running your business. You're learning about your business as well, and you're learning about your business objectives, and that business and these business objectives is dependent upon, you know, the landscape, the market, what is occurring. And so in reality, when you have an optimizer, when you have an optimization, when you have this collateral, when it's tagged, it's marked, it's correct, and you understand exactly what's going on, in general, the way you have done that is you have set some elements as the variables that you want to optimize, whether it's a business that you want to do, the decision on the pledge or the receipts. But then you also have things that you have set as constraints. So the constraints would be, for example, the agreements that you have in play, which are effectively defining what you can actually execute, whether they are trading agreements or collateral schedule. In reality, you learn about yourself, you learn about what your business is, and then you make decision. And on that basis, you then rediscover the inventory. So for example, you could be pricing your agreements, the optionality that's contained inside your agreements. You could be understanding exactly what are the constraints that are really driving your business, or actually stopping your business from progressing. So whether it's you know, of course, the obvious suspect for a lot of people are going to be balance sheet, capital, and funding costs. But there are other things that you may understand better, and that means that really collateral is then moving on to a more enterprise level, where you need to take a view of the overall business and understand exactly how that's done. So it's a journey, and you need to use the optimizer once you have it, you're not optimized. You are just constantly considering exactly what the factors are in order to understand how you need to evolve your optimization environment.
So as well as looking at the assets available and the demands or otherwise upon those assets across a range of products, business resources as well, to be factored in, limit or enhance what you potentially can do and how you can move towards optimization. But that's a moment in time, if you like. Thinking about how that picture has evolved over the years, when collateral, certainly from what we've heard already in this session, has become more of a complex area for us to manage effectively. How do those demands vary for the buy and the sell side? Your own, maybe.
Okay, so well, and this is from my perspective, I would find it difficult to say the whole of the buy side or the whole of the sell side, because of course I have a little window, which is the Broadridge window onto that market, and so it's going to be more my experience, the feedback that I get from the buy side and sell side clients that we are working with. And I would say that in general on the buy side we have people who are more focused on value propositions, on solution enablers, increased demand for concentration rules, ratios, these sort of things. We have more on the sell side demand for driven by regulation still around leverage and capital initiatives, whether it's sponsored repo, whether it's on the margin side, on the collateral side, HQLA driven initiatives, and automation. Absolute strong drive for automation. I mean,
Ted, any thoughts on the differences between the buy and the sell side from your perspective?
Well, the automation is certainly a big topic, and right now we're in a stage, and I'm going to bring it back to UMR again, because this is a driver for a lot on the buy side right now to look at their processes around collateral management, because they're going to be shifted, or they are shifting from just pledging cash for their derivatives to now actually having to pledge non-cash as well. So, there is I guess a general drive to get things ready for that, but not just be ready to do the minimum, but actually look at how processes can be approved across the board. I mean, to bring it back to optimization and that topic in particular. One interesting trend that I'm seeing, and something that we're working with some of our clients on, is when you're considering how that inventory gets allocated. If you can think about an asset manager that's managing multiple clients and multiple funds, each with different strategies and different I guess profiles of assets that are available. A true optimization scenario is not just looking at the assets that you've got, but the assets that you could get access to, and to consider how to automate the collateral transformation process within that optimization strategy, and actually sometimes internalize it within the asset manager itself. So that means doing transformations or upgrades between the funds or clients, so that, for example, a fund that is maybe mainly equity based, but needs some treasuries, for example, as collateral for their derivatives, can get access to those without having to go externally into the market. So that's an interesting trend that I'd not seen before.
Okay, Grant, turning to you, we've seen that it's an ongoing process and a complex process as well. But from your perspective, what are your views on where that process begins and ends, perhaps?
Big question, yeah. So look, I think one of the things I was writing down as we were talking is about reducing the barriers to entry. Yeah, so there's a lot of barriers to enter this market for a number of people in a cost-efficient way. Yeah, so we can all have layered technology to create efficient solutions. Tag an asset, which is important. Yeah, so Neil outlined it incredibly well. Tagging the asset, knowing why you've got it, how you can use it. Do you need it off balance sheet? How are you going to trade it? How are you going to move it? How are you going to settle it? And then coupled have all the technology solutions out there. Look, I mean, you have to put yourself into your client's shoes. And I think we sometimes, not us generally, but sometimes you do lose sight of that. We've been in this market for a very long time. Understanding how a client is set up is incredibly different in every organization, incredibly fragmented. Understanding what they need to achieve and how they're looking to do it is really just looking at, I suppose, their world and the business they're involved in and the right solutions for them. So look, we talk about efficiently optimizing assets, which is something the tri-party agents did a long time ago in an old world, and they still have a role, but optimization, whether it be pre-trade, you know, knowing what asset you've got and how you're going to deploy it, pre-settlement, how do you deliver it efficiently to the place you want to deliver it to, like your tri-party agent to send out, and then post-trade for the life cycle of the transaction. So there's a lot of components, and look, it is a complex market, and we just have to break it down. And rather than layered technology, is think about how we have connected technology solutions from a view of assets through to trading the asset, through to managing the post-trade environment. And I think that's certainly why I focus at the moment, and where we Equilin focus. It's about looking at the full trade life cycle. And if we can break the barriers there, then look, there's various ways to and I think Neil mentioned that as well at the beginning, taking in data, seeing what value an asset has within our sec finance industry is important, but then seeing how best to deploy it, whether it be on swap, whether it be on repo, whether it be on SBL, so that we can enable the guys that need to move away from just deploying cash because it's easy and simple. But to deploy cash that's easy and simple, you also have to hold a cash buffer, which is not efficient for any fund in any process. It's a drag on your performance. So how do we find a way to ensure they have the tools available to them to be able to simply deploy an asset and point it in the right direction to do the things they need? And where are we in that journey? Look, it depends on the organization, of course. I mean, we can create the ultimate solution for all clients. I've seen people do it in a number of ways, but it's at what cost? Yeah, so it can then suddenly be a cost inefficient transaction. And we do need to make sure we keep that in mind as we look at solutions for clients. And look, it's quite nice if you get a new client come in. Yeah, so, and we do still have new clients in this industry, which is great. Yeah, so more entrants that are coming in, and to be able to sit in front of them and say, okay, this is the history if you want to know it, but let's not go there because it's complicated. Let's talk through what you need and then the tools that are available to you to be able to be very efficient. And I think that's one of the most important things to start to think about and break down, is helping clients do things from a, whether it be a balance sheet point of view, operational, but also from a cost perspective, price discovery, and from just overall operational cost. Look, you can layer that with more regulations coming, like CSDR. I heard it talks about on one of the other panels. It's coming. But one of the things I think was missed in there is you think about if you're deploying assets in our sec finance industry, making us efficient, but you've got to think about the broader capital market. Yeah. So what is out there as a capital market that needs to become efficient because it's going to get a lot more costly for them to transact. And this is a circular business. Yeah. So that cost ends up at the end investor. And that end investor is us as a pension fund as well. Yeah. So I think that's the kind of process that we're getting to. And look, we're a long way along from where we were in history. And the tools that are available are, look, we've all got certain tools we can deploy and certain things we can give as solutions to clients. It's really understanding what they need and breaking down that opportunity for them.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob. Some really good points. Now, I'm sure some of the tri-party providers will be pleased to hear that they still have a role. So that's good for them.
Got to make the risk here.
You touched on a number of things there, which are really interesting. So again, the ability to choose between your actual type of transaction, what makes most sense, be it swap, repo, stock loan, to touching again on the point that Jerome made around resource management and balance sheet, etc., which I think is interesting. Now, I put this question to all of you. Don't all feel obliged to answer, but you touched upon barriers of entry. So if you're on either side of the market, buy side or sell side, recently having contended or about to contend with SFTR, UMR, a whole bunch of other regulatory pain we've seen since 2010, and you're looking now to it's become more important for you, as it has done for every size of participant, to manage their collateral and optimize it across all the topics we've discussed so far today. That's great. There's systems here available to do that for me, but presumably they come at a cost. So what do I do if I'm not that big a player on either side of the market and I want to come along and play? Look at you all rushing to answer.
Get your shopping cart out and go and look. I mean, look, reality is, I mean, someone said it on one of the other panels, you've got a technology shopping cart, and for the light touch clients, there's light touch solutions. Yeah, I mean, look at SFTR. We've just come through that. I mean, there's light touch SFTR solutions. So for collateral, what are you trying to achieve? Is there a light touch solution to execute and get involved in the repo market? Of course there is. Is there a light touch solution to be able to touch some of the efficiency processes we're talking about here? There is, but it's really, there is a size limit to a client, of course, in this market, and it's really just breaking down what the revenue, what are you driving for from a revenue perspective? What's the opportunity for you? We do that all the time. We actually go, okay, what are you trying to do? What is, what the value of your assets in the first instance? We can help with that. And so how do you best utilize them? Let's help you look at that opportunity first, because then that's your target operating model in the first instance. Where's your business opportunity? Then break down the costs and see what it's going to take to achieve that, because there's not only technology, it's legal structure, etc. Should you be doing it direct, or should you be going for an agent, because an agent can do an efficient process really simply for you? There's enough of them out there that would be happy to talk to those clients, and enough solutions that people have spoken about for some time where they can do that and leverage their infrastructure. So it's really, yeah, there is barriers, of course, to certain client types, but guiding them in the right place, and us all being honest with clients when we talk to them and saying, look, we're probably not the right solution. Maybe you should go and talk to these guys, because that may be a better route to market for you is something we have to do.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that we all have to admit is that total cost of ownership of our platforms is not cheap, and it comes at a cost versus the front desk. It comes at a cost versus those revenues. Now, if you're looking at what we were referring to earlier, which was hosting a number of platforms due to historic purchasing, then your total cost of ownership potentially needs to come down. And because ultimately, if you look at the revenues that are being achieved and you look at some of the data that's coming out, the entrance into the market, the deemed oversupply, it's making the ability to make that money more difficult. So really what we should be looking at is what our total cost of ownership of having these platforms is. And of course, with things like SFTR, there's other things to take into consideration in order to send across your repo lending transactions, your collateral. You have to pull all of this information together. So as regulation increases, we can only expect that there'll be more difficult for us as owning different platforms to go forward with that. So you'd need to seriously take into consideration all of these factors before it is a decision on how much you can earn or what the reason for you to enter the market is. Of course, we all believe that the reason people want to lend or do repo is because they want to earn money. Of course, we also know it's a fantastic way of accessing HQLA with different maturity types and term types, the evergreen structures that enable you to do that. Now, it comes at a cost, but it may be a cost that the institution's worth paying for.
Thanks, Neil. Jerome, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think actually I'm going to contradict some of the things that were said, but in a nice way, hopefully. I think that, in order for people to access the market, I mean, I completely agree that total cost of ownership is high, but I wouldn't say it's total cost of ownership of the platform. It's more like what Grant was saying, which is that you need to have the legal aspect, you need to have the operational aspect, you need to have the infrastructure, the custodial infrastructure, etc. I think that there are many aspects to this. So, for example, the agency model is definitely trying to help people. You've got custodians who are developing a very large number of solutions to make it easier. You've got, of course, a tri-party model via a clearing agent, or and a custodian in general behind that. So you've got lots of business solutions, and then you have as well. You have, of course, software vendors like some of us here, who of course are developing solutions exactly for that purpose, to make it cheaper for people who want to have a much smaller set of abilities, but want a solution that is actually cheaper to own and cheaper to execute. Of course, it comes with, you can do less, but at least you can do something. So I think that, for me, I think that we are coming out of a very long period where we were just keeping up with the regulation, and we are now into an innovation period. I see a lot of strong innovations, and these strong innovations is also about enabling much smaller participants to access that market. And so I see a lot of things coming in that space, and a lot of solutions.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I add to the point on access to market? Because one of the things on collateral, which is still relatively OTC in nature, but we're trying to change that to an extent at Equiland. So collateral trading is something that gets done bilaterally, gets done on Bloomberg, gets done between counterparties, isn't overly visible, and it's one of those things that we believe, and there's a lot of market participants that believe, that needs to become more visible, more easier to access. And like we talked about, seeing your assets is one thing, being able to see how you deploy them is the next, and creating visible liquidity. Look, I think it's not just necessary, it's something that we have to do as an industry to ensure that we grow and support the liquidity of our markets.
Excellent. No, thank you, Grant. I think it's interesting. It's good to hear that whilst accepting there are still some hurdles in terms of costs and actually benefit as well for smaller participants, it's good to hear that there's movement in that direction to make the right sizing the solutions, I guess, is one way of putting it. Taking a look ahead, Ted, I'm going to come to you on this next question. We're familiar with Isla's work on the common domain model. What are your thoughts on CDM, what it might achieve, and how it will practically impact market participants?
Oh, I'm glad we can move on from that, because I thought that that part of the discussion where we had technology vendors saying our platforms are much too expensive.
My work is done here.
Yeah, look, I mean, CDM. This is an interesting initiative, right? It's one of those things that I guess Jérôme was just alluding to, about how do we get better value out of what we provide, and how can we reduce overall costs within this marketplace. So CDM, everyone's familiar with it, right? But it's a common domain model. It's a common way of describing or defining reference and static data, so legal agreements and instruments and so forth. But not just that, but also lifecycle events and post-trade processes and so forth. So the idea is that you have a common standard that that platforms use within an organization, but also more broadly across the market, and that removes a lot of the friction that you get from when you're trying to communicate, having to map data, to translate data, and so forth. So I mean, what is really good about this is that ISDA have taken the initiative that was developed in the derivatives world through ISDA. They've not tried to reinvent the world. So we're just extending what has already been developed and to some extent taken up within that world, and extended it into securities lending. I see that going into repo as well. So that's good. I think the one I guess pain point that we often come across with our clients, and just going back to that tri-party question, is the There's often where we've done, I guess, global optimizations that take into account a particular tri-party that might be optimizing within its world. There's often a discrepancy that comes up from, what assets actually fit into a particular schedule. So if you've got a common definition of those schedules and a common definition of the assets, and you can map them all together, you remove that remove that potential for discrepancy. It makes the potential for a global optimization much more achievable. So there I see one good thing to come out of this. It's a step, obviously. I think the last panel was about distributed ledgers and blockchains and so forth. It's the common domain model is sort of defining smart contracts that will then fit onto the blockchain technology. So it's kind of forward thinking in that way. So with CDM, there's a POC. We're part of it. I think some of the other participants on this panel are also part of it. That's ongoing at the moment. There's going to be a demo scheduled to the industry, I think in December, where we're going to show the first kind of iteration of CDM in action, from trade execution through allocation. So that's going to be kind of interesting to see it tangibly there.
Thanks, Ted. Before I open it up to the others to answer, just to remind the audience that if you have any questions, you can send them through us on the app. Gents, any further thoughts on CDM? Grant, you'll be pleased to hear about standardized collateral schedules globally. The
nirvana, yeah. So are we ever going to achieve that? So no, I mean, I think it's a really important point, and challenge the industry. Let's create one standardized collateral schedule just for a liquidity sleeve, and I think that will help everyone. So, and I think that kind of thing is really important, because if you don't make that process really simple and you don't create consistency across the industry, you create friction in a product and a process. And there's enough collateral friction within internal systems, aging architecture, that creating it from a transparency of collateral point of view is not helpful. So yeah, I think standardization is one of the most important things we look at and we encourage.
Right.
So I agree with that, with everything that's been said, and I'm a strong proponent in favor of that standardization, because it really makes things simpler. But I just want to put a caveat in that, which is that even if you are a securities lending system, even if you are a collateral management system, even if you're a repo system, you're just one piece inside the ecosystem of our client. They have risk systems, they have general ledgers and finance systems. And in general, a lot of the complexity that is built into our systems is actually related to the interfacing of these internal systems, of the way that they look at things. And that's creating friction as a result of that. We already saw that as part of SFTR, whereby the way some trades or some trade events were actually booked, or they were booked like that because inside our accounting plan, that's actually important, and we recognize that. And that, this is where the limitation is. So if the CDM, when CDM comes and it facilitates the external face of the system towards the other parties, that's fine. But you've got the internal side, and collateralization is very much both reconciling external and internal. And then you have that problem of the internal system. So as much as I like CDM and I'm a proponent of it, I just want to set the expectations that we still have that problem of having to carry the other pieces, the interactions from the other pieces of the ecosystem at our client side.
Okay, thanks, Jerome. Conscious of time, we've got a few minutes left. You mentioned blockchain, and the panel before us spoke about that earlier on. So in the interest of time, I'm going to throw the last two questions we planned together. So one, do you see any use cases for DLT in the securities finance collateral space, particularly now or in the near future, and if so, where? And finally, from a technology perspective, do you think that technology will open up the possibility of additional forms of collateral, new forms of collateral to become acceptable? So I'm thinking cryptocurrencies for one thing, and perhaps looking at tokenized securities or tokenized other assets, which become more, generate more liquidity, and therefore could enter a whole new realm of collateralization and add some more factors for you all to consider in that optimization tool going forward. Any thoughts on that?
Loads.
You got 2 minutes, go.
I mean, look, so it makes absolute sense. Create a standardized asset. I mean, look, HQLX are one of those guys out there that was spoken about in the previous panel. Look, it makes sense. It's a liquidity layer, creating something that can move as a basket simply sitting on top of tri-party. Look, I think it's a transitionary process to an end goal. And I think one of the things I think we need to consider within distributed ledger, blockchain, whatever we want to call it, is really what's the end goal? Are we quite got the use case there yet? And what's the transitionary process to get there? And is the industry going to embrace that transitionary process? Because it takes time and effort and focus to do that. So look, 15, 20 years ago, we were talking about, it makes sense to create a basket of assets, move it simply, it just becomes a mobile collateral process. Fully embrace it. And it's just really, comes back to the point, and I will say it again, Ted, you layer technology, you layer cost, and you just need to think about how that is utilized and make sure it becomes more cost efficient over time and that this becomes a seamless infrastructure.
Jerome.
Well, I think I'd go exactly what Grant said. So I'm not going to advertise anything, but Broadridge, we have a DLT solution which has a use case which is implemented at some banks and whatever. So we're strongly behind that. But I think that what Grant was saying about layering is very important. If you create yet another layer, then it's going to have a very large return on the investment, because you are creating another layer of complexity, and that would have a cost. And so that's really important to understand. The trouble is, of course, for delayering, you then need the participants, but then you have the problem of making sure that the participants still have a role to play in your future vision. So if you go over the custodians and you say, I've got a fantastic thing for you, you're going to participate in this, and then you have no business, it's an interesting proposition to come to them about. And so that's the issue, the problem with layering, delayering. The fact that, the distributed nature of DLT and the universality, yes, absolutely, there's a use case for that. But how and at what cost and for what benefits, that's still ongoing, I think.
Okay, excellent. If there's no other thoughts from the panel, I'm going to hand over to Kevin, because I think we're pretty much there in terms of time.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah, I'm cropping up again, calling last orders on this session now as well. I thought that was really, really interesting. I credit to you guys for doing a good job in 40 minutes on what, after all, is a topic that I think could take all day if you wanted it to. As I said at the beginning of today, I've not been very involved in what's been going on for a few years now, so I was kind of enjoying some of the stuff that was coming up. It kind of reminded me of things that were happening 4 years ago, but in fact things have moved on a long way as well. And also really kind of interesting that this was kind of a neat subject sandwiched between the blockchain one, which was also referenced, and the liquidity session, which is coming up next, which also clearly this plays into. So I'm going to say thanks to Bill and thanks to the panelists. Excellent job. Remind you all that you can now visit the networking booths of the sponsors, and I think at the moment there are going to be presentations from Raising Castle and HQLAX that are going to be happening live. So please don't forget to click on the buttons and go and have a look at what's going on there. And with that said, I will see you all again at 3 o'clock for the last panel session, which will be on liquidity. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.